Welcome to the Massage Tools Podcast, your home for cool interviews and reviews. Can I ask real quick about your practice? Approximately how many hours of bodywork are you doing a week?
Pre-pandemic, I was doing about 30 sessions a week over
Okay.
5.5 days. After our 2-month shutdown, I sort of reevaluated how much I was working and realized maybe I didn't want to be here quite that much. So I'm averaging 20 to 25 sessions per week right now, which is still pretty full-time practice, but it's a lot slower for me. Yeah. So
Sure.
I'm basically here Monday through Friday, and then usually every other Saturday or something like that.
Of course. That's, again, you've been in the field for a while, so I'm always curious. And it's a question I wish I had asked Tom on the podcast, but approximately how many hours pre-COVID, he's working or ideally would be working and whatnot. Because, 25 to 35 hours it's a lot of time to be up and moving, and,
Right.
everything with clientele. So it's always a question of, or in my mind, I'm like, oh, there's got to be some great biomechanics or other factors involved and whatnot. So I was like, I got him here. Might as well ask the question for a seasoned person. So
I attribute my longevity in field to sort of good genes, relatively stable joints. I don't have any hypermobility, uh, which can be a killer for massage therapists. And I learned early in my uh, practice to eliminate some things that I was taught to do in massage school that I could tell were just going to kill me in the long run. So there's just, I just was trying to be smart about how to preserve my ability to keep working. And of course, maintaining my own fitness has been a priority for me too. It's
what was
definitely been challenging now because I'm I've never been good at exercising at home. I always have to have a place to go to, like a class and so then the gyms were closed, and it's really been challenging now to try to go back to the gym, which I have started to do again because capacity limits and working out with a mask on is really a challenge. It's not impossible, but it's not that fun. Your heart rate goes right up because you can barely breathe. So I'm trying to sort of work my way back into being a regular at the gym because I really did let my fitness kind of fall away over the summer. So yeah.
Yeah, if I can rewind back for just a little bit, you said there were some things that you cut out of your practice that you learned in school because you felt
Mm-hmm.
they were going to be detrimental. Can you give
Yeah.
can you give an example of that?
Oh yeah. The main one I'm thinking of is there was the client supine on the table, and you're sitting at the head, and you slide your arms under their back, right, with your fingers on either side of the spine, and then you do this, and then you pull up like this. It feels great to the client,
Mm-hmm.
but look what I'm doing. My fingers are all flexed, and my wrists are cocked, and then I was starting to feel sore in the carpal tunnel area. I was like, oh yeah, I'm not doing that anymore. So
So I
that's
think
the
that's
main one that I think about.
yeah. I
Yeah.
feel like that's a great technique if you are maybe a climber, rock climber as a
Right.
hobby. So
Yes. Yeah.
you are an instructor, and you've got a number of books that are out there. One of them I can see sitting in the background, your facilitated stretching, and I actually have
Yeah.
that book. I've started the online component of it even before I was able to get you on the podcast. And
Awesome.
yeah, so will you tell us a little bit about the facilitated stretching? What kind of sets it apart from, assisted stretching, or what makes it unique?
Facilitated stretching is just a version of PNF stretching. And PNF, for your listeners, is proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. It's a physical therapy modality that was developed in the late 1940s, early 50s by a physician and a couple of his PTs who were trying to maximize their ability to do rehabilitative work with polio victims, vets coming back from the war who had brain injuries or neural damage of some kind. So PNF primarily is based on looking at patterns of movement, and the stretching component of PNF is one that I learned in my sports massage training with John Harris, and that when he opened his school, he had a PT come in to teach a more thorough version of that, and that PT had studied with the founders of PNF, so she was very well versed in the technique. And basically, PNF stretching is targeted at working with the nervous system as opposed to sort of, if you want to think about the muscle end of the nervous system and the brain end of the nervous system. And so PNF stretching employs the use of an isometric contraction of the muscle prior to the stretch of the muscle. So a lot of PTs used to be trained in PNF. It's not that common for them to learn that method anymore, except as a post-grad technique. So facilitated stretching is really based on what I learned in my training with Harris and his crew, and then just refined over the years just the way as I've practiced it. A lot of times PNF stretching is done as a passive movement, so the client will be on the treatment table and the practitioner will move the limb to the end of the passive range of motion, and then have the athlete do that isometric contraction of the muscle just lengthen. And then the practitioner will passively stretch to a new range of motion. And the thinking, the neurological piece of it is that isometric contraction helps to set up a post-isometric relaxation moment. Sometimes thought of as autogenic inhibition, but it appears that the Golgi tendon organ, which used to be thought to be the one that mediated that, may not be as involved as people thought back when the technique was developed. Anyway, after that isometric contraction, something happens neurologically where the muscle is more amenable to being lengthened without pushing back against resistance. So PNF as a passive movement is practitioner moves the limb to the end of range, athlete does an isometric contraction of that now lengthened muscle, and then the practitioner passively moves to a new range of motion. I like to practice more of an active engagement with the client. So facilitated stretching teaches a more active movement. So instead of me as a practitioner moving the client's limb, we have the client actively move their limb to the end of range they can already achieve. That gives us that second neurological input called reciprocal inhibition, which most of us have learned about. So when they actively move to the end of their active range of motion, then the practitioner will provide resistance for an isometric contraction. So now we have reciprocal inhibition and post-isometric relaxation occurring together. And then the athlete will increase the stretch by actively moving to their new range. So instead of it being a passive movement that the client just is sort of having done to them, they're actively moving, they're actively engaged, and I think, and others who do that more active form, think that there's more like neurological connection going on as well as more like learning, so that the client is starting to get a sense of how they can control their own motion, and hopefully that's going to translate to when they're, up and about, right? So
Yes.
instead of having the practitioner impose something onto the athlete, me as the practitioner, I'm just facilitating their ability to move more freely with greater ease, less restriction, less resistance to those ends of range of motion. So, is that good?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great
Yeah.
description of the book. I think so when I was training with Bill, he taught us PNF stretching that's very similar to what your basic stretching protocol that you have laid out in the book. So it's very, very similar, very familiar. I think the value that you add to it is some of the other things you have in there. Your directional, your D1, D2 type of work. Drawing the sword and buckling the seatbelt. I think that's a very. I use that not necessarily with the stretching, but I actually use that for my cupping patterns a lot of times when I want to free up the kind of periscapular area. So it's like instead of pin and stretching, I cup and then have them go through those diagonal patterns as a way to get the
Right.
scapular movement and whatnot. So that was an impressive part out of that book for me. I hadn't come across that before, so that's solely yours. Props, but thank you for delivering it to me anyway. So
So those spiral patterns, those are not mine. Those are your basic PNF patterns developed in 1950s.
okay,
So I always joke because it's called the diagonal pattern one and diagonal pattern two. If they had been developed in the 2000s, they'd have some really fancy name, don't you think?
sure, sure,
But so so we were trying to come up with so that the draw the sword and the buckle the seatbelt. Those were just kind of things that kind of helped me to convey what we want people to do. So the diagonal one pattern, in the original PNF training, they would teach the therapist like you need the diagonal one pattern in order to feed yourself, right? So that was like if you're going to eat an apple, you have to be able to do this, flexion, adduction, rotation, right? So the whole pattern comes like this,
sure.
as you know. So one of the nice things that I've been able to do with the book over the 4 editions, okay, it's been out like 25 years, unbelievable, uh, is to continue to bring in different elements of the PNF work. So even in the first edition, we talked about the spiral patterns, but not much. And in the last couple of editions, we've been able to add in more detail about using the patterns for stretching as well as for strengthening. So it was really fun to go into the gym with human kinetics and shoot the videos and the photos inside a gym. And because I've been doing that for myself for a long time. And it was great to be able to incorporate that into this latest edition so that we can maybe spread the word a little bit more to not only therapists but a lot of fitness professionals use facilitated stretching with their clients as well. So being able to teach personal trainers how to incorporate these spiral patterns into their work with clients to just improve again their overall movement patterns. So instead of doing single plane bicep curl, bicep curl, bicep curl, push, push, push. How can we do some more sort of spiral diagonal work? It's more like what we do in our normal lives. So I'm glad you're enjoying that.
It is, yeah. It's a excellent addition to the collection of books I'm trying to go through.
So let
So,
me ask you this.
yes.
When you're working with clients doing stretching work with them, are you doing single plane stretches mostly, or are you trying to incorporate the pattern work into the table stretches that you do? If you
For
do.
for the most part, I'd say probably falling a little bit more into the single plane work because
Mhm.
usually I'm playing a little bit off of what they're feeling and like
Yeah.
or if they come in a lot of times I just articulate it like there's all the special tests, all the special orthopedic tests. My client usually comes in with one. They're like, it hurts when I do this weird multiplanar movement. So I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of our, that's client's test. And then we go through and we'll play along. So sometimes
Mhm.
it will be, like I said, a lot of my PNF does tend to be single plane or it becomes multiplanar just because we take them through a position where it's like, they're like, oh, I feel the most stretch there or I feel tightness there. So I kind of um, will put the strict anatomy aside and go with their perception of what's going on and see if we can change their perception of that. So but it would mostly be kind of in the single plane. To be honest, I'm not going to try and lie.
Well,
It's all single plane for the
no,
most part.
no. I mean, I typically will do single plane work much more commonly than the whole spiral diagonal pattern. Again, unless there's some issue that we need to be able to sort of suss out, like, when I do this motion, so, maybe we'll do a spiral diagonal stretch and then go, oh, you feel it mostly in this part of that position. Then we might do just some single plane in that range, do some soft tissue work, and then, so sort of combine the, the stretching work with the soft tissue work to change their perception of the way it feels. Because that's really seems like what we're really doing, right, is affecting the nervous system more than anything. And if the brain interprets something differently, hopefully that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, that feels better. Okay, I can do that. It feels safer to do that, and now I can do that because the nervous system will allow that motion to happen.
Yeah, as I've started to understand the body more, and I still feel like I'm tip of the iceberg at this point, but I feel like a lot of what we're doing is just facilitating movement in our client. So if they have an injury, they're reducing their movement both consciously and subconsciously. So when they get on the table at the end of the session, it's, can they move more degrees of range of motion or whatnot on their own? Do they feel safe? Do they feel comfortable doing that? And whether it's tape or stretching or tools or whatnot, they're all methods to help them move more. And then their movement is going to do a lot of the rest of the work. It's going to, if they're moving, they're going to get better lymphatic drainage. They're going to get better vascular flow in and out of the area. So it's, the job of physical therapists, athletic trainers, massage therapy is kind of, can I get you to move and feel safe moving again, and slowly, or not necessarily slowly, but increase that back to normal, or from a performance standpoint, increase that with the body feeling safe the entire time. And that's where the magic is. So
I totally agree. Totally agree.
yes.
And I think in our field, in the therapy field in general, I think a lot of us are in that same mindset. It's like, we used to think we're doing something to the muscle, and now we know that we're doing a lot more than that. And if our end goal really is to improve a person's ability to feel safe doing whatever it is that they do, for their nervous system to go, it's okay to do that, and so allowing freer, more joyful movement. Right? Yeah. Back to doing what we love, right?
Yes.
We have to get back to doing what they love. And we assist them by helping to dial back their nervous system with whatever method we use. Right? Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, folks. The mission of Massage Tools Podcast is to inspire. So help us inspire you. Ask questions, leave suggestions in the comments section. Give us a like if you enjoyed the video. And if you want to see more content, please click that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and hey, check out these links for other videos here.